I welcome everyone. It is good to be with you. We have lots of folks out of town. We have people visiting with us. We're thankful for you. And we're just continuing to make our way right here through the heart of summertime. And this summer, we are pulling the felt boards down off the Sunday school walls and looking at Bible stories for grown-ups. And we've taken fresh adult looks at Noah and Abraham, Joseph, Moses, and then last time, Joshua and Rahab. This morning, we meet Super Samson, who was not a superhero. Samson was one of the Old Testament judges. That's a little confusing for people sometimes. That's not in a courtroom. But in the Old Testament, the judges were these rescuers, these deliverers that God would raise up to deliver the nation of Israel from their enemies. And so that idea of being a rescuer, we need to hang on to that a little bit, because that is the very thing that Samson never quite becomes. I must tell you up front, this is where our grown-up reading of these stories hits hardest. Samson is not really a hero or a role model at all. His life really serves more as a warning to us. And that is difficult to hear because we are taught as children to admire him. He's the superhero. He's the biblical strong man. But reading Judges chapter 15 as an adult makes you kind of honestly ask yourself, is there like a single moment in this chapter that you would want your children to copy? Judges 15. He torches the tails of 300 foxes and burns down a nation's harvest. People die. He kills 1,000 men with the jawbone of a donkey and then writes himself a victory poem about it. Right? This is not a Sunday school hero. It's a cautionary tale about a person, about a group of people obsessed with getting even. And so before we look at Judges 15, we need just a little bit of a glimpse of the backstory of chapters 13 and 14. And so Samson's story starts with a sacred calling. He's dedicated to God from birth under a Nazirite vow. No wine, no razor, no touching the dead. And he's set apart by God to free Israel from the dreaded Philistines. That's who he's meant to be. But chapter 14 shows us who he actually is. He demands a Philistine woman for his wife. She's the one I want. On the way to meet her, he kills a lion with his bare hands. Returning later for the wedding, he passes the carcass, finds a swarm of bees and honey inside, and scoops it out to eat. Breaking his Nazirite vow by touching the dead, does so without a second thought. At the wedding feast, he makes a riddle out of the very lion and loses the wager when his bride pries the answer out of him. And then to pay the debt for the wager, he kills 30 men for their clothing. He storms home in a rage, abandons her at the altar. And that loose end lights a fuse that will become his vengeance. As chapter 15 opens, Judges chapter 15, as that opens, Samson comes back to claim the wife that he walked out on. But she's been given to another man. And so that's just so much of that. It's just bad. Now, when we walk backwards through what comes next, notice what happens. This is chapter 15, going backwards. Samson kills 1,000 Philistines. Why? Because they invaded Judah to capture him. Well, why did they do that? Because he struck down a bunch of them in this big slaughter. Well, why did he do that? Because they burned his wife and his father alive. And why did they do that? Because he torched their fields. And why did he do that? Because his father-in-law had given his abandoned wife to another man. And so each act answers the one before it. None of it breaks the cycle. The whole thing just gains momentum the farther they go. Each blow only invites a harder blow. Samson's own vow gives the game away. Chapter 15, verse 7. Samson said to them, "Since you've acted like this, I won't stop until I get my revenge on you." Folks, the desire to get even, it runs deep in people. And the chapter says it plainly on both sides. The Philistines say, "We came to do to him as he did to us." And Samson says, "I merely did to them what they did to me." The world might call that justice, but it's anything but. And it's because revenge always escalates things. There's two lies buried in the story, and people tend to believe both. First is that getting even is justice. That getting even is justice. It's fair, it's my right. But getting even is never even. There tends to be this escalation. Moses' famous eye for an eye was never permission to get people back. It was a limit. It was a ceiling. Like for like. It's not do them one better. And so God knew that left to ourselves, we don't really want a proportional response. We want a disproportional one to up the game. Human pride always wants to take it up a notch. They did this to me, I got to do it back to them with a little more so that I win. The second lie is that getting even will finally solve the problem. Samson swears he won't stop until he gets revenge, as if payback has some kind of finish line. That one more blow, man, that'll settle it. It never settles. For Samson, it ends only with more death, eventually including his own. And so we declare war. We declare war on all kinds of stuff. On our enemies, on poverty, on drugs, terror, each other. Believing that if we can just inflict enough power, inflict enough pain, the problem will yield and cave to our victory or whatever. And yet it never really kind of works that way. Not between spouses who keep score, not in these age-old rivalries between nations, where every retaliation becomes the other side's provocation. We retaliate, it provokes them. They retaliate, it provokes us. Vengeance is not a solution, it's a wheel that just keeps going. And here's where the chapter really gets just like genuinely sobering. And it's the detail that the children's version just can't afford to tell, right? So Samson is not just one bad apple. One bad apple that's gone too far. The whole society has rotted around this conflict of back and forth. The pattern of the book of Judges is clear. The people sin, an oppressor rises up against them. They cry out to God. God sends a judge. The judge delivers a victory. The land has rest. And then it repeats. The people sin. An oppressor arises. It just goes on in the cycle. By Samson's time, though, the cycle is broken down. The Philistines have oppressed Israel for 40 years this time, twice as long as any other time before. And yet this time, Israel never cries out to God for help. They've stopped wanting to be rescued. God sends a deliverer anyway. And then comes the most condemning moment in the chapter. When Samson strikes the Philistines and the enemy then arms for war to come back, Samson's own people do not rally to him. They come to arrest him. Listen to what the men of Judah say. Verse 11. Judges 15:11. Then 3,000 men from Judah went down to the cave in the rock at Etam and said to Samson, "Don't you realize that the Philistines are rulers over us? What have you done to us?" And he answered, "I merely did to them what they did to me." And they said to him, "We've come to tie you up and hand you over to the Philistines." 3,000 Israelites march out, not against their Philistine oppressors. They march out against their own judge to tie him up, the man who's supposed to be fighting for them, so that they can then hand him over. Don't you realize the Philistines rule over us? In other words, man, don't make any more trouble. Let's keep the status quo. We'd rather stay comfortable in our chains than risk being free. Especially with whatever it's going to cost if you're the one leading the way. In the end, Samson, the strong man called to rescue his nation, he dies as he lived. You remember the Sunday school ending? Delilah coaxes the secret of his strength from him about his long hair. The Philistines shave his head. They gouge out his eyes. And they chain him to grind grain like an ox, until he brings their temple crashing down on himself and kills 3,000 of them. Even that final act of vengeance, let me die with the Philistines. Right? He's blinded. Not just physically, literally, but he's blinded by his vengeance. And he's chained in his own weakness, and he's killing others, and he finally kills himself. Ultimately, not really rescuing anybody. And so the Sunday school version of crashing the temple down, it's not like some big victory to celebrate, but the tragic end of a violent life of Israel's most controversial judge. And yet, astonishingly, after all of that, Hebrews chapter 11 in the Hall of Fame of Faith lists Samson among the heroes of faith. Not because his life was a model, but it wasn't a model. But because grace reaches even the man who wasted everything. Which means God's grace can reach us too. But don't miss the cost. Because the wheel of vengeance took his eyes and his strength and finally his life. And so let us learn our lessons from Super Samson, who was not a superhero. If vengeance is a wheel, how do you get off of it? You can't out-retaliate your way to peace. History proves it. From the movement of nations down to the grudge that somebody carries with them for 50 years. You can't out-retaliate your way to peace. You cannot bully your way to safety. Samson proved that with 1,000 dead bodies. The wheel only stops when somebody absorbs a blow and refuses to pass it on. It's exactly what the Apostle Paul says in the book of Romans in chapter 12. Romans chapter 12. Verse 17 says, "Do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everybody. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Do not take revenge, my friends, but leave room for God's wrath. For it is written, 'It is mine to avenge, I will repay,' says the Lord." On the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he's thirsty, give him something to drink. And in doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. God does not excuse evil. He takes the scales out of our hands and he keeps them in his own hands, which are always perfectly fair and just. Our job is not to settle the score. It's to feed our enemy, pray for them, and overcome evil with good. As Jesus reminded us earlier, love your enemy, pray for those who persecute you, that you may be the children of your Father in heaven. And so we called him Super Samson because he was strong, and yet the man was really a slave to his appetites, to his rage, undone again and again by his own weakness of character. Real strength is not the strong man who overpowers others. It is the king too weak to carry his own cross, who could have called down thousands of angels, but instead absorbed the blow of sin himself, praying, "Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Revenge is weakness pretending to be strength. The cross is true strength that the world mistook for weakness. That's the power of the gospel. And so I have to ask, where is your wheel still turning? Right? Most of us aren't out there torching fields. But we're really good at the slow simmer. The marriage where every wound is repaid in silence. The old family conflict that's never settled and even passes on to the next generation. Eventually, they don't even know what the original thing was even about. The grudge that we've nursed so long that we hardly even know who we are without it. Becomes part of us, gets in our bones. We tell ourselves we're owed. And that will stop once they admit we're right. See, getting off the wheel doesn't mean pretending that every wound, that the wounds never happened, right? Getting off the wheel does not mean pretending that the wounds never happened. The way of Christ is not denial. It's honesty about the real harm, held together with a refusal to return the harm. Truth and mercy right in the same hand together. And it's the hardest thing the gospel asks us to do. But it's the only thing that ever actually can break the cycle of revenge. Grace, forgiveness. It's what disarms the powers. Because evil has no answer for someone who will not return the blow. I've said it a bunch of times over the years. Somebody hauls off and hits you in the face. They're waiting to see what happens. Because if you turn right back around and hit them in the face, everybody knows what's next. But if you don't retaliate, then what? Then what happens? Because their expectation, the world's expectation, everybody's expectation gets blown up about what happens next. Now, it's so easy for me to stand here and say that. And then you got to do it. You got to deal with that. And yet it is proven out on almost every page of the scriptures. And certainly in the words of Jesus. And in his life. Samson shows us the dead end of grudges and revenge. Christ shows us the door to forgiveness and freedom. And so let us overcome evil with good. Samson, it's a tough one. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 19. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 19. For it is commendable if a person bears up under the pain of unjust suffering because he is conscious of God. But how is it to your credit if you receive a beating for doing wrong and you endure it? But if you suffer for doing good and you endure it, this is commendable before God. To this you were called because Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example that you should follow in his steps. Then a quote from Isaiah 53. He committed no sin and no deceit was found in his mouth. Peter continues, when they hurled their insults at him, he did not retaliate. When he suffered, he made no threats. Instead, he entrusted himself to him who judges justly, to God. God will make it all right. Whoever your enemies are, whatever they've done to you in this life, God is going to sort that out. And he is in the process of doing it even now. Know that. Verse 24 says, Jesus bore our sins in his body on the tree, so that he might die to sins and live for righteousness. By his wounds you have been healed. For you were like sheep going astray, but now you have returned to the shepherd and overseer of your souls. I encourage you to put your faith and your trust in Jesus. Take these hard lessons like this that just are contrary to everything the world teaches us, everything we naturally believe in ourselves, and see the truth of it. And come to know that Jesus has gained the great victory on the cross and through his resurrection. And he is enthroned in the heavens, sorting it all out right now. From the nations that rage against each other, to social conflicts between groups, down to individual struggles in our relationships within our own selves. He is sorting all of that out, and the great victory has been won. And we are in this whole process of this cleanup, these skirmishes and all that even happen after the decisive battle. And he is making it right. And he is changing us, individually and as a group. Slowly but surely he is. We can see it. And in the end, all will be made right. I encourage you to put your faith and your trust in him. Turn away from the world, what you've been taught, what they've done to you, what you've done to them. Turn away from it. Turn to God. We call that repentance. Have a change of mind that leads to a change of heart and action. Be baptized into him. Put that old person to death. Be raised again into a new person. God's Spirit coming to live within you. And then slowly but surely, step by step, day by day, learn to pray, learn to obey, learn to do what is right and good. And you will in time come to take on the very image of Christ himself more and more. And you will start to see these things resolve themselves right around you, within you, in your own heart, your own thoughts. And so I encourage you to come to him while we stand and sing together.